Diversity of thought is good.
Yes.
However, it's not always immediately productive.
I know in my own business, I've challenged myself with this and said, okay, if we hire this person, are they going to add to the culture or are they going to fit into the culture?
Initially, we were very much culture fit, hired people that naturally fit into the current culture, naturally fit into the current way of working. And then as we grew, it was a case of trying to get people that would add to the culture.
But I also have a culture that's lean, that's very forward thinking, that's very inclusive.
A lot of organizations have got a really precise culture, but no way of measuring how aligned or not somebody is.
Yeah.
So the easiest, simplest, laziest thing that they can imagine is
the topic for this month is cultural fit versus cultural add. What should leaders look for?
Damn, that's a big one.
It's a very big one. I like that one. I like that
Culture fit
one.
versus culture add.
Yeah.
So my view is to sit on the fence massively.
What? You can't, you're not allowed to do that in this podcast.
No,
but...
let me land. I think it depends on who you are as an organisation. Depends where you are as well.
Okay.
And I say that to say, I think it's very easy, and I've heard a lot of like D&I practitioners band out about, it's about culture add, and you have to challenge your thinking and diversity of thought and all of this stuff. That's all good and well. If you're a multi-billion pound organisation and you can afford to make the odd bad hire here or there. Yeah. However, if you're running a really small, lean organisation, as both of us do.
I was just going to ask you about this.
It's really, really important that any culture that you add has to be progressive, has to be productive.
Yeah.
And this is kind of one of my, subtext critiques of this whole diversity of thought thing. Yeah. Diversity of thought is good. Diversity of thought is good.
Yes.
However, it's not always immediately productive.
I agree with that.
So we could have a really good conversation, disagree on a lot, and there's a lot of diversity of thought.
Yeah.
But if you're moving at pace, i.e. every second you spend talking about something is a second that you're not making money. Mm-hmm. That diversity of thought gets to a threshold or gets to a point where it just becomes unproductive. So that you need that diversity.
You might have a diversity of thought, but you might not have a business.
100%. Yeah, you can have all of these great conversations about, you see it one way, I see it another way. How diverse is this thought? But we're here to make money, and we're not making money just by disagreeing.
Yes.
So I think it has to be aligned to what it is that you're trying to achieve, how quickly you're trying to achieve it, and how much resource you have to help you achieve it.
Yeah.
So I've not answered the question either way.
No, you have not
answered
that question, Mac. No, you have not.
I'll come back. I will end. By the end of this podcast, I'll end.
Interesting one. I actually like the question and the conversation more than probably the action.
Okay.
Because it makes you think. It's made me think in hiring in my own business, right?
Go on.
So I've seen a couple of examples of it. So I had a candidate, and he was a French candidate, and we placed him in America. This was years ago. I phoned him, fantastic guy. I phoned him, checking in, how's it going? It's the usual stuff. And he says, Scarlett, I've had this difficult situation where I've been told it's not the, how I'm acting or I want to kind of lead is not the American way.
Sure.
Right. And it was really interesting. And at the time, I remember sort of just talking around thinking, oh gosh, we want you to stay there and we want this to work out for him and the client. He's relocated his family.
Yeah.
It did work out. It worked out really well, actually. But in hindsight now, this topic of conversation, that example always comes to my mind because I always think, is it a cultural add or is it a cultural fit? And he's still in the business. Touch wood, let's all touch wood. He's still in the business. He was last time I checked in. And he's obviously added a lot to the business, been very successful in that business. I do think though, that it was a very big business, right? So it's able maybe to everyone can adjust and can adapt. I know in my own business, I've challenged myself with this and said, okay, if we hire this person, are they going to add to the culture or are they going to fit into the culture? I've typically hired to fit the culture. I want to be transparent about that. But I also have a culture that's lean, that's very forward thinking, that's very inclusive, and I hire thinking about where do we want to be in 3, 4, 5 years time. I'm not hiring for where we've been for the last 7 years time or the last 20 years time. So I think my approach is probably quite different in that respect. It's something that I encourage all of my leaders, actually, all of our clients to think about.
Yeah.
I think there's varying circumstances as to which way that actually goes and what the outcome is.
100%. And I think the reason that I probably find it hard to answer this question, again, thinking purely internally, and I will talk about it externally as well, but internally, we've kind of been on a little bit of a roller coaster ride in terms of, I think initially we were very much culture fit.
Yeah.
So hired people that naturally fit into the current culture, naturally fit into the current way of working. And then as we grew, it was a case of trying to get people that would add to the culture. And it was more representative, as you said, of looking 3 to 5 years into the future to say, what type of organization do we want to be in 3 to 5 years time?
Yeah.
And therefore, who is going to help us get there? However, we probably use a lot of poor proxies in that to say, okay, if people have come from these types of organizations, then they're used to working in a certain way. That could potentially add to what we're doing. But I think, again, there's a difference between like personal culture in terms of the values that people naturally bring and kind of the professional culture in terms of ways of working, norms, things that can be molded and developed over time.
But when we're talking, and that's really interesting that you say that, because when we're talking about cultural fit, the question or cultural add, it might need to be, well, what does that mean? Because I've had clients over the years, say to me, oh, Scarlett, I've got a sales team that's all men and we all support, this is genuine, happened. We support this football team. So if it could be someone that could fit into that, it would just make things easier. So you're like, okay, well, I can't work on that basis, but, so that to him, I guess, was cultural fit.
Yes.
For me, cultural fit is probably more values led. It's saying, are the values of our business, the things that are important to us in terms of turning the dial, the purpose that we have as a business, is that important to you?
Yeah.
Because if it's not, that's okay, but I don't know that you're going to be lit up and you're going to be excited by the things that we're doing. And I think for someone that it is more important to, it's probably a better fit in terms of driving us forwards to our goal.
Yeah. It's interesting though, because I feel like a lot of people, and again, I'm going to personalize this slightly. I think a lot of people that work in D&I have stated values that are different from their actual values.
I think a lot of people in general.
Yeah, no,
I think
definitely,
that's in general.
Definitely. Yeah. But I think it's weirder in the diversity and inclusion space when you see people that state these values, and there's a weird dynamic where I think people are used to preaching a certain message that they then feel their values have to be a certain way, even though their values probably aren't.
So do you? Yeah, it does. So it's interesting that you touched on that. So do you feel that it's that they feel they should be this individual, so they're going to say these things, but actually that's not who they are?
Absolutely.
What?
I think a lot of it is that quite a few people in the D&I space fall into D&I rather than it being something that they actively want to pursue.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I feel like a lot of people see the opportunity in this space, but don't necessarily have the skill set, characteristics, like the personal drive to want to excel. It just feels, and I think a lot of people kind of leverage their lived experience in this area.
Yeah, I've seen that actually.
But again, back to your question, I think, you have to define what culture is, and I think I've heard culture be described as the things that happen when nobody's looking, or the things that happen without somebody dictating that they have to happen.
I think that's an excellent example of it. Would you, if you were seeking a role, I know obviously you're running the equal group.
For now, we'll see.
You're always welcome over to Harper Fox. If you were seeking a role, would you as an individual be looking at a cultural fit alignment, or somewhere where they could add to you or you could add to them?
That's a really good question. I think I'd be looking for an organisation that fits with my value set, but also one that I know that I could be myself. And that was definitely the case towards the end of my career, where I went into interview processes not looking for a job, but looking for an environment that would allow me to bring the best of myself. And, it probably sounds a bit arrogant, but I've always known that I am a good catch for an organisation. So not always. I think probably earlier in my career that was less the case. Towards the end of my career, I was very much confident enough to know what I bring to the equation. Therefore, whenever I was looking for a role, I was interviewing them more than they were interviewing me. So I came into it with a case of, with a perspective of, I want to make sure that my skills are not going to go to waste. I want to make sure that the person who's going to be line managing me has the ability to line manage me in a way that challenges me, but also respects what I bring to the table. And that's the kind of environment that I'd be looking for as an employee. As an employer now, I'm looking for people that are teachable, but also very self-aware. And I think self-awareness is one of the greatest assets that I see in people, to say, I'm self-aware, I know what I need in any given situation, I know what environment is going to bring the best out of me. And on the contrary, I know what environment is not going to bring the best out of me, so that you can make informed decisions and choices to say, if this environment doesn't work for me, these are the things that I'm going to do to address it, or I just need to remove myself from that situation. But for me, self-awareness is such a massive gift.
And I think there's a cultural safety element to this as well, right? And I was just thinking back to one of my first recruitment jobs, and the typical fit in the recruitment industry, I know I'm in search and stuff now, but the typical fit is white male, just come from university, 1 year sales experience. And I rock up. I'm not white, I'm not male, I hadn't gone to university, I had a hell of a lot of sales experience, though, definitely way more than 1 year, had two kids to boot as well. So I knew I was completely different. And I don't know if it was my personality style and that resilience that I kind of had from my journey that had come before, and just the hunger in me. I didn't really care that much, that I was aware of it, but I was always used to being different. So it was fine. But I remember walking in on one of the first days, and the line manager let slip. He said, I knew you were going to be great. I got like my first deal quite quickly, right? And he says, I knew you were going to be great. I just knew it. But one of the directors didn't want to hire you. Yeah. It's okay. It's all right now. Don't worry, everyone. But one of the directors didn't want to hire you because you're different to who we typically hire. And they knew you were a wild card. You were a risk, right? And that was like 3 weeks in. And I thought, oh, bloody hell, I'm a risk. I'm a wild card. Again, it didn't deter me, actually, because I was used to that. But I was also going in at 26 years old with 2 children, with leadership experience. I'd had great opportunities before that and worked my way up. So I had a different mindset. I do wonder if I wasn't who I was, and maybe had the experience or some of the emotional maturity that I had at that age, would that have been overwhelming for me? Would that have deterred me? Would I have felt like I wasn't a cultural fit at all? Because I wasn't. That's the truth of it. And I think we need to be really conscious of our environments. And that's not an example that's caused me harm, but we know there's environments where people are excited. Oh yeah, cultural ad. You're coming into a zone that is not comfortable for a cultural ad of someone it's not necessarily emotionally safe.
But do you think that his comment around the director not wanting to take you on because you were a wild card, or can't remember,
there's a wild card and a risk.
Yeah.
They didn't know I had the 2 children at this point. Wait till they found out the 2 children. No, I went on to be their top performer year on year, just to be clear.
Okay. And was that because of kind of the circumstantial differences, or was that a difference in value set or culture?
Well, they didn't even know my circumstances aside from I'd not been to uni. So there was huge disparity from my circumstances to what they were hiring. So no, I'd say that I was a woman. I was mixed heritage. I hadn't been to uni. And you know, to be fair to them as well, I'd come out of a more senior role and taken a bit of a drop to go into this because I could see the opportunity and I wanted to earn more money for my children. That was the truth. So I guess there's an element there. And I was different, and I went in and I felt different. I knew I was different, and I was working out, and I spent a lot of the time there working out how do I fit in. And I found that experience has made me so passionate about the work that I do today, because I know how uncomfortable it feels to not be your authentic self, to not talk about things that are actually happening in your life that are really relative, because the people around you can't necessarily understand just because they've got a different life to you. And to almost be a bit silenced, you know? And because of that, it made me vocal in certain areas where I felt like I could be and quiet in others. And now makes me really passionate about being transparent and being open and creating spaces where that's possible, because that was not my lived experience.
The same or similar in terms of, I think I spent a lot of my career being very quiet, very cautious about what I say. And I used to remember going to industry meetings and wanting to say something, but thinking it over in my head like for 5 minutes before I actually said something. And I would like word it in my head, make sure that I've got it down, and then like psych myself up to speak. And I was just thinking about it in terms of the amount of cognitive strain that placed on me in terms of like going into those spaces, not necessarily having the confidence to say what I wanted to say. And I knew that my contribution was valuable, but I'm not sure if my difference was like the barrier that stopped me contributing. But I think as I got older and a bit less concerned about how I was viewed, all of those things just rolled out, and I was kind of less in this position of holding my tongue or reframing things or questioning things. And also part of that was just observing the fact that nobody else did, and people were, again, respectfully, not that intelligent. So it wasn't like, you were like, it wasn't a huge,
I've got something great to contribute.
Yeah, it wasn't like a massively high bar. But I think that whole point about not necessarily fitting into the culture, because you have to, like it or not, you have to learn the culture first. You have to learn the environment that you're operating in. You have to learn the norms. You have to learn how people phrase things. Even things that I was talking to someone the other day about the importance of like work experience and exposure. So things like how you draft an email and how you respond to emails in a professional or just well-considered manner is stuff that you learn over time. And I think that's one of the great shames of kind of post-COVID hybrid working, where people are coming into the workplace and they're not necessarily understanding the norms of how things get done, even how to like diffuse situations. We had an issue in our business a while ago where somebody made a mistake and they weren't sure they weren't aware that it was a mistake, because there was kind of no one there to see it, and we talked it through, but I think they really panicked about it in a way that they probably wouldn't have done if we were in an office setting. And these kind of things that you take on that you don't necessarily understand the full extent of what's happening, again, because culturally you're not that aligned to the way things gets done, if that makes sense.
I think it's a really interesting point that you're touching on. The vast majority of us are hybrid working or remote working, are flexible to some degree, more so than we've ever been before. The culture piece then of how things are done or how things are enforced, is it then more difficult to enforce a business culture
100%
and standard?
And I think that's kind of going back to the question of culture add versus culture fit. I think in a hybrid setting you kind of want that culture fit, because you then don't have to monitor people as closely, because you have confidence that culturally you're aligned. So you may, again, the work that you have to do is on ensuring you're on the same page on other things, so business objectives and performance, rather than the culture.
Yeah. No, it's a really interesting one. I'm the biggest advocate of cultural ad. You know, I love cultural fit and cultural ad. I love the question. I love the question. I think the question is so important. But it has led me to think more about environments, and you've touched on it where, you know, you've questioned that. And I think we have a responsibility when we're hiring, or as an organisation or as leaders, to really question, okay, if we're going to bring in someone with this cultural ad advantage, phenomenal. But how comfortable are they going to be? Are they going to feel comfortable speaking up in that meeting? Or are they going to be overthinking or feeling like, should they say or shouldn't they say? I spoke at an event recently and a woman said exactly what you said to me, a young woman. She said, oh, I'm different here. Really quick, she just grabbed me at the end. I'm different here. As you can see, I've got lots to say, but I'm not sure whether to say it. You know, I'm not sure how it's going to be perceived. So there's a responsibility, and I think there needs to be an awareness as leaders and as organisations that if we're expanding the cultural ad, which I hope people do, but actually there's a responsibility as well, is how do we get the best out of our people and how do we make them feel safe?
It's an interesting one, because I think to some extent those conversations could be separate. I don't think they are separate, but I think they could be separate. And I say that to say there's a lot of organizations that have spent years and years and years refining their culture.
Yeah.
And because there's no real tangible hard measure of somebody's culture coming into the organization, you really lean on poor proxies. So by that I mean, you know, if one of the consultancies we worked with a while ago used to only hire Cambridge and Oxford graduates. And that was their proxy for, we want people that think a certain way, we want people that are used to performing a certain way. And the closest we can find is what people are taught at Oxford and Cambridge.
Or the type of individual it gets into.
Absolutely, but what they didn't account for is what that done to their diversity and inclusion metrics, to say actually there's a certain demographic that typically have or historically gone to Oxford and Cambridge, therefore you're narrowing the scope of who you can hire based on who goes to those universities or institutions. I say that to say a lot of organizations have got a really precise culture, but no way of measuring how aligned or not somebody is. So I guess the easiest, simplest, laziest thing that they can imagine is, I have those cultural values. Let me look for people that look like me, talk like me, support the same football team as me.
Yes.
Because those are the things that it's very easy to check, rather than say, you know, we want to check how hard people work or how honest people are or how much integrity people have. Those are the harder things to measure. And I think,
I'm so pleased you said that. That's so accurate, you know. And sometimes very subconsciously, just to say, absolutely. This isn't often a conscious, people don't say, I just want someone that's just like me. It's just that, you know, it's more comfortable. I can relate to you. This is easy. Okay, we can crack on with it.
Absolutely. And there is something quite arrogant about the way our minds work, and it is to say that we typically, not all of us, but most of us, see ourselves as being quite great and quite
superior in some way.
You said it, not me.
I'm not saying that's me. No, definitely not. But it's the truth, though. No. But it's the truth, right? Everyone's got their own movie.
Absolutely.
They're the star of their own show, aren't
100%.
they?
And I think the easiest thing for us, and the way our brains work, is to see greatness that we're familiar with. So it's like, if somebody presents in a way that we're used to people presenting in, we see them as being credible, being good. What we're not great at is seeing greatness in a depiction that isn't something we've seen before. That makes sense. But I say that to say, I think there's a lot of organizations that lean on poor proxies, where I've seen it be detrimental in kind of contrast to your culture ad perspective, is people are trying to diversify, but they bring in diverse candidates that absolutely don't fit their culture.
Yes.
And
or
that can be
maybe necessarily value system.
Absolutely. And that can be quite disruptive to the organization. It can be disruptive to you know, the way that things get done. And
well, it could be the opposite in terms of the benefit that it's trying to, it can actually give a poor experience of something. And I've seen anyway.
What sense?
I've seen that play out.
Yeah.
And then the diverse hire in this instance has not worked out.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And then the organisation or people in the organisation, we're never going to do that again.
Yes.
Oh, look what happened there. It's
Absolutely.
the opposite. It was actually just a bad hiring decision.
Yes.
That's the reality.
Absolutely. And I think that can be quite damaging. But what I've seen actually is organisations fundamentally struggle with their identity because they get into this weird pattern of questioning their culture because the people that represent their culture most strongly aren't diverse. And actually, from my perspective, it's not a case of questioning your culture, it's questioning the process for bringing diverse candidates that already align with that culture
into the business. Yeah, spot on. And how do you, I'll give you an example. Thinking how transparent to be. I have these moments back, I'm like, okay. So I sit on a board. Let's go with that. I sit on a board and it's charitable. And I was acutely aware when I was being interviewed and asked to be on this, that I was different to the women that were there. So this is all women. And I just knew that I had a perception that they were maybe quite affluent and successful affluent white women. And I, a successful businesswoman, I guess, but that's not my background at all. And I found it really hard to connect. And it actually made me question, even though the mission was something that I'm really, really passionate about, it made me question, is this a space that I actually even feel comfortable in, even though they were vocal in saying they're trying to add difference to their culture. So they were aware of it too, right? And they said that to me. And the only thing that made me change my perception was somebody else that I met in that organisation. And I looked at her and she looked at me and I thought, she gets it and I get it. And we get the client base. Brilliant. I'm all in. But what could they have done? They were aware of it. And they thought, right, how do we bring somebody in that's maybe closer to the client base in inner city Birmingham or more representative of who we're serving, because we're not, but we're doing these amazing things in the community. How do we change this? How do they stop me from feeling like that, or someone like me going in?
And it's an interesting one because I think people kind of conflate this feeling a sense of affinity to people with culture. And I think sometimes cultures can be really inclusive, but actually our own perception of self or our own perception of other people stops us engaging in what typically can be quite a healthy culture. So it's like the people might be great, the people might be really inclusive, the people might have exactly the same values that we have.
So true.
But because we don't identify with them as individuals.
It's our own biases, right?
Oh, 100%. 100%.
It's our own bias.
Yeah.
I had to check myself and go, hold on, Scarlett, am I judging them because actually they are speaking in a certain way? And actually, am I the one with the bias? Quite honestly, yeah. Because I think what you're saying is accurate. We're absolutely all in on the same mission, and phenomenal people as well. I think it works both ways as well. So it's like we judge people, people judge us. And it comes back to what I was saying about like when we're not used to seeing something, a set of values, a culture represented in something that is so far away from our reality. Our initial instinct is to reject it, or our initial instinct is to doubt that they have the culture that we have because it looks different. But actually they might. And, from a personal perspective, I've got a lot of friends that are Southeast Asian or Greek Cyprians that they have very similar. So I'm Nigerian. We have very similar family values and even like personality traits, the humor that we use, very, very similar. But you'd never know that by looking at us. And actually, culture is something that sits beneath the surface that I often think people conflate with identity. Should the question actually be then, how do we look for the cultural crossover, like the cultural? Is it that we need to look for it or seek where the alignment can be rather than actively trying to hire differently or look for different?
Well, it depends what you're looking for. And I think that comes back to the fundamental question that, are we looking for people that fit our culture, our current culture, whether that's our current culture or the culture we're aspiring for, or are we looking for people that don't yet fit our culture, that we can either assimilate to them or they assimilate to us? my view is that cultural fit wins most of the time. The only caveat that I'll give to that is if you currently have a really toxic culture, you don't want to fit with people.
You don't want that.
You don't want more toxic people to add to
definitely not.
how ingrained your toxic culture is. You want people that are different from that level of toxicity you're facing, that will lead you out of being toxic.
Yeah. And I think my thought on it would be actually to look for the cultural ad.
If you're toxic?
No, not
or just generally.
We stay away from toxic people, Mag. We stay away. Definitely not. But generally, I think look for the cultural ad that someone can bring. Doesn't mean that's who you hire or you bring into the organisation, but I think it's a good check-in point for ourselves. I really do. I think it's a good checkpoint of, am I hiring like me, or am I speaking to like me, or am I best friends with like me, or actually am I really open to exploring and understanding what this individual could bring and how we do align in terms of our personal or professional mission.
I think I still stand by culture fit. I think for me, culture fit is the kind of safest strategy, with a caveat that we need to move away from poor proxies. And I think there's a lot of poor proxies in terms of, this person looks like me, supports the same football team as me, has the same family set up as me, same sexual orientation, religion, etc., etc.
That's not the cultural fit we're talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we have to get better, both individually and collectively, at defining what we mean by culture. So values based. So what are the values that are important for you as an organisation? What are the values you live by? What are the things that happen when nobody's looking, when nobody's monitoring, that reinforces who you are as a business? I think those are the things that you should be looking for when you're hiring.
What's the character? What's the essence? What's the minerals of the individual?
Absolutely.
And that versus the organisation.
Yeah.
And that alignment.
Yeah, absolutely. Final thoughts?
I think that was it.
That was it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know, I might have a final thought now. Yeah. Your final thoughts?
My final thoughts
I might have one to add.
Yeah, look, I think culture ad is one of the, from my perspective, again, don't cancel me, I think it's one of these buzzwords that people say just to be cool. I don't think people mean it, and I don't think people are ready for the amount of challenge that comes with culture ad. And this is why the caveat that I made at the start was really important, in terms of, if you've got time and space and there's no urgency in what you're doing, absolutely look for culture ad. However, I think for a lot of organizations, you're trying to move things forward very quickly, and you don't necessarily have the luxury of trying things out for years and years and years and seeing what works and seeing what doesn't. I think for most organizations, you're in that level of urgency. If you're hiring, you kind of want impact from day one. So you don't want to test out somebody's rubbish ideas. Not to say that different ideas are rubbish, but you don't have the time and the luxury to test out.
Was that a swipe at me? Was it? I'm joking.
Not at all. But I feel like some people put themselves in this, like, I'm a culture ad hire, and they just want to be disruptive and they want to be like contrarian, and there's no need for it. But maybe that's my trauma speaking. Maybe I want people in my business that are fully aligned with the direction of travel and kind of want to add bits of innovation that will improve things, rather than, blue sky thinking. Let's just go back to the drawing board, and it's like, who's got time for that?
Yeah. Okay, I have a final thought as well. I think the question is really important to be asking, but actually suggests that people maybe think less about the fit and the ad, and they think much more about the culture. And I think if you're really looking at your culture and where you want to be culturally as an organisation, and that is central to your hiring, that will be success.
So it sounds like
I thought you were going to do a sound effect then.
It sounds like you're sitting on the fence slightly.
No, I'm not sitting on the fence. I'm taking it out. I took the fence out, man. I took the fence out. I'm just sitting on the grass. I'm a cultural lad. No,
we don't have time for these random
blue
questions.
sky thing. No, I think the culture is central to it. And actually, it's interesting because as we were initially talking about it, I thought about the football team or the looks, or have we got kids the same age? I actually was thinking about culture in terms of that alignment. And the more we've had the conversation, it's been really good because it's challenged me, is I've actually thought, that's how I thought, that doesn't really matter. What's the culture of the business that we're creating or where the business is going? That is fundamental to everything here. And that, I believe, should be the focus.
Absolutely. Amazing. I think that's it.
I threw the question out.
You did it.
Yeah.
Done. We'll make our own questions. Blue sky thinking.